Morning. So my clip-on mics won't fit in my computer while I'm charging it, so I'm using this big ass microphone. But I just want to talk about the effect of places, the effect of our surroundings, our setting, how that impacts consciousness. So I'm going to bring in various traditions, specifically non-duality in Buddhism, to kind of address how places affect the psyche and the soul, and what we experience. So you could say, if you are surrounded by soulless things, if you live in a soulless setting, as in a cubicle, if you don't have inspiration around you, you live, I don't know, in a prison cell, then it's very difficult to cultivate beauty, inspiration in consciousness. There's a certain experience that is evoked out of consciousness from those surroundings. So, again, just imagine in a cubicle. Kind of fucking sucks. Lifeless fluorescent lights, just straight lines, cardboard setups, and computer monitors. What does that do to your system, your being, your consciousness, versus being in Notre Dame, being in a Buddhist temple, or in a mosque in Iran? That kind of architecture, that kind of style, that soul, I will say soul, that is inhabiting those places, it invokes a different experience out of you. Reverence, depth, profundity, spirit, soul. When you are in a beautiful cathedral, they're incredible works of art and just monuments of human capability, really. The same with like temples, stupas. In Tibet, all of those places carry a certain energy and it affects you. But it's not just, holy places, traditionally speaking, it's also in nature. If you're in the middle of the desert, there's nothing around. It's a certain kind of feeling, energy that is imprinted on consciousness, versus I'm at the top of a mountain pass in the Rocky Mountains. Beautiful, but different experience that's evoked, different flavor, different soul. The same is true of, if I'm at a river, it evokes something different. When I'm in this tiny ass room, I love this room, but it's tiny. Moving out soon, but there's an experience that's evoked. And that's why it's important to decorate your spaces, because there's a certain feedback loop going on between consciousness and space, where you could say at one level, the setting, our surroundings, is imprinting consciousness. Always we cannot separate our experience from the setting that experience is taking place in. But simultaneously, consciousness, to a degree, is, plays a role in creating its setting. So if in my living space there's just shit everywhere and it's disorganized, that has a certain imprint on consciousness. You might know what I'm talking about. If you don't clean up your room, your space, your mind is cluttered, just like the space is. It's kind of, again, a feedback loop, reflections of one another, where there's shit everywhere, I can't think straight. Or I can't think straight, so I don't clean up, and there's shit everywhere. So interestingly, if we want to clean up our minds, a very simple way to do that is actually to clean up our surroundings. This is kind of, I guess you could say, like a pragmatic implication of non-duality, where consciousness and that which we are conscious of are not separate. So this brings us to beauty. What is the role of beauty in life, in experience? And we could ask, what is a life without beauty, actually? What is a life without beauty? Fucked, I would say. Like, quite literally. So beauty, this can be flowers, a clean, organized space, something aesthetic on the eye. Again, this is the role of aesthetics, which relates also to depth psychology and the role that image plays on experience. Where, again, when we integrate depth psychology and emptiness, we could say all that there is image. And these images are not just visual, they can be somatic, felt, emotional resonances. But in this empty void, all we're left with is this play of the imaginal. That's a word that Robert Bea, James Hillman have used to describe, again, this plane of imagination. But I digress. Back to beauty and spaces. Why do you think cultures have built beautiful temples? Beautiful, like intricate hieroglyphics, the Taj Mahal. What is the role of beauty in life? What about romantic love? That is also a resonance, a level of beauty. What is life without that? You take it all away. Again, fucked. So, this brings me also to an interesting point where we can start to dissect the experience of beauty and recognize that our experience of beauty is not just given. Beauty is a co-created experience. The experience of beauty is actually dependent on us. Where it's like, okay, if I'm at the top of a mountain pass again in the Rockies, I'm taken aback. Like, holy shit, this is gorgeous. For sure. Same with if I'm in Notre Dame or a beautiful temple. Taken aback. Wow. But at the same time, the flavor of the mind, of the chitta, the heart mind, that kind of state flavors our experience. So, there's a saying that is, the only Zen that you'll find on the top of the mountain is the Zen that you bring up there. So, how do we cultivate that Zen? That single-mindedness, that centered place in the psyche, so that we can really be receptive to beauty? I would say there's many ways. Contemplation, prayer, meditation, something that again centers, elevates our openness, receptivity to experience. Because absolutely everything can be related to, tuned into, in a way that actually evokes beauty out of the being. Soul, spirit, depth, meaningfulness. So, what we're pointing to is actually here. Fucking planes driving around everywhere. So what I'm pointing to is, I guess, a feedback loop more than a simple mechanism, which is that both places, settings, surroundings, have the power to evoke experience out of us, whether that be inspiring and beautiful or the opposite of that. And simultaneously, consciousness, the viewer, has a fundamental role to play in our perception of spaces. And again, if we're going to like a depth psychology perspective, point of view, lens, which emphasizes the role of archetype, image, and actually the necessity of suffering. And not just suffering, but darkness, shadow, the inescapability of those things. We could say that even dark places, even mundane places that don't dramatically impact you, consciousness can learn how to view it in a certain way that evokes those experiences of depth, purpose, meaning, beauty, out of places that we previously would have just said, it's all right. The example is the cubicle. Again, it might take more work to cultivate a sense of beauty in regards to the cubicle than, I'm at the pyramids of Giza or, again, beautiful cathedral. Different. But it is cultivatable in the sense that, again, viewer and the viewed are not separate. What I see and what I sense is actually dependent on how I'm seeing it, the lens that I wear. And vice versa, though, I think, again, we need to understand that this is kind of a feedback loop. There's a back and forth going on between consciousness creating, again, from the inside out, creating beauty or lack thereof. And then we have the role that places have on us, where we recognize that, again, there's a reason we build monuments to God, to spirit. There's a reason why we honor natural places. Because again, that sense of beauty, meaningfulness, connection, reverence are necessary. And what is life without those experiences? Really, what is life without those experiences? And when we recognize that life is shot without beauty, depth, those deep resonances, we recognize the absolute necessity of beauty and beautiful places. And so again, we can cultivate beauty on the inside through the lenses that we choose to adopt and try on and view through. But it works vice versa. We can also build in the external 3D world monuments to God, beauty, things that invoke reverence automatically. And again, once we get that feedback loop on lock, who knows what the world would look like when we're not caught in this one-dimensional materialistic plane, and instead we understand the depth of dimensionality we can access with the human mind, which is including the invocation of beauty, the invocation of spirit, God, depth. It's actually endless, but understanding this vertical plane instead of being stuck on this horizontal one-dimensional plane. Because you could say the greed, the selfishness, the never enough, more, materially speaking, and through the accumulation of experiences, which is now the new hot trend, all of that is taking place predominantly on this flat plane. And you can amass infinite things, infinite diverse, fun experiences. But if it doesn't have that vertical dimension of depth, beauty, resonance, oneness, reverence, those kind of resonances, you get to this point where it's like, who fucking cares? Is this all that life is? And that's a common thing today. People are like, is this all that life is? Living on this one-dimensional plane. And the answer is, if you're trapped in the one-dimensional plane, yes, this is all that there is. But when we really remember the access to the vertical plane, when we escape this world that has been conditioned to believe that God is dead and has thus created that world, when we escape from that and recognize, from my perspective, the emptiness of all experience, including a godless world and a world enchanted with one or many gods, we create that. And we create, again, the atheist perspective, which I think maybe for some people it actually serves a purpose in their psyche and their path. But for me, I'm at a point where I want to live in an enchanted cosmos. And there's no ceiling to the level of enchantment that we can create other than the one that you create. Again, from a non-dual Advaita Vedanta perspective, and again, non-duality is sort of understanding there is no two. We're not even all one, because that would imply there's a zero. It's just not two. So we're all interconnected. I mean, that's an understatement. Yeah, recognizing that we are creators, we are divine. If there is a divine, that's us too. As above, so below. As above, so below. If there is a creator, if there's divinity, that is us, unless we say otherwise. Because again, we are the creators. We create the narratives and the stories that we live by, and we create the limitations on ourselves, including the limitation that I'm just one-dimensional human. I'm just a matter-based life form, and that's all that I am, and somehow I randomly ended up in this place, and I don't know really what's good. That's a story, and that story fucking hurts. You can feel it in your system, and we don't need to live by that story. And this is what I'm preaching, is the impact that story has on everything that we are, everything that we experience. I cannot overstate this, whatever the fuck. We need to understand the role that story, narrative play on everything we're experiencing, not just up here, but what we feel in our bodies, the world that we walk through. These are built on conceptual understandings and overlays that we then project onto reality and ourselves. And we can learn to deconstruct the shitty, unskillful ones, or just the limiting ones. And the key that I'm trying to show people is that there is an option. We're not stuck in what we experience. So first we deconstruct the limiting beliefs, and then we reconstruct it with literally anything we fucking want. And that's the thing, we are creators. At the deepest level, you can create anything. There's just a certain momentum of narrative right now. Again, materialism, scientism, reducing reality to this little narrow mold. And this is just limiting. And it's a damn shame to take this human experience and to limit ourselves like that, knowing the potential that we have with our heart and minds to create worlds, again, from the inside out, and then from the outside in, through construction, architecture, the cultivation of beauty, reverence, connection. So that was a little bit of a tangent, but it all connects. If you're watching this video, I hope you understand that this all does connect. So I want to full circle take it back to place, setting, the feedback loop of the viewer and the viewed. So you could say that the world we experience today, the cities we've built with, as a consequence of the modern Western mind, are a reflection of that mind, where it's rooted in, again, materialism, scientism, reductionism, capitalism. It's all about money, and how do I make the most efficient building to make the most money so that I can fit enough people in there to get the jobs done and make the most rent on people leasing office space, whatever it is. Again, it's the fundamental aspect is beauty, or money. And I'm saying, what if we shifted that to beauty? Instead of worrying about how am I going to make money, how am I going to make the most money, it's now how can I make this building the most beautiful, the most aesthetically pleasing, invoke a certain experience out of the human consciousness. What if we had skyscrapers with trees popping out of them, rivers running through them that were aligned with the solstice or whatever? I'm just saying, how would that impact the psyche? Be like, whoa. Again, those ancient places where they had buildings that were aligned with certain times of the year. The equinox, solstice, the sun peeks through a little hole only on that date. That is a recognition of our connection to the cosmos. And who knows the narrative and the story that they were operating from as to why they did that. Was it just functional for like crops, or was it deeper than that? Because again, you remember year after year, oh, the sun has peeked through this little hole. And yes, we are tracking the cosmos. We're tracking the star in the sky. We recognize this interconnectivity. What does that do to the psyche? So this has been a video on places. And I think this topic is really cool. Because it's once you start to pay attention to it, like, ooh, how does this place make me feel? How does this place? You start to really know that it works like that, actually. And also you can start to play with consciousness as far as, internally, to be like, not just receptive, but active in the construction of beauty. Where it's like, oh, this is a weird vibe. This building is like dark and oppressive, that kind of 90s, like, kind of lifeless, dead kind of architecture. You see a lot of like old office buildings or whatever. It's like, ooh, kind of dead. But you can start to appreciate that, actually. It's like, oh, wow, again, if you can open to that. So you can start to play with consciousness in the construction of beauty in places where the soul might not automatically resonate with it. But yeah, I think this is a really interesting topic. I hope you think so too. And yeah, that's the video I got today. Thanks for watching.